We're going to go ahead and get started. Everybody can just take a seat. I think we've got plenty of seats. We've got the Zoom that's hooked up, I believe. My name is Jeff Webb. I'm the chairman of the committee. We've got some good speakers lined up today for us. And since we have so many new people here today, or people we haven't seen in our meetings because we haven't been in this large room, I'm going to ask our members to introduce themselves. We also have Senator Blackwell here. We appreciate him coming. Representative Yancey may be on Zoom, but I don't know if he could make it or not. But
Dr. Ben Young. I'm an optometrist from Meridian, Mississippi. I'm the secretary of the committee.
My name's Austin Calhoun. I'm the vice chairman, and I'm also the state appointed patient for Mississippi.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Edney, State Health Officer representing the Health Department. Randy Easterling, I practice Stanley Medicine.
Afternoon. My name is Dr. Justin Turner. I'm an internal medicine and chief medical officer for the Mississippi State Department of Health and a part of the advisory committee.
Aye.
I've got a few statistics that I asked for, and Department of Revenue and Department of Health. Quickly, licensed medical cannabis dispensaries currently is 187. Licensed dispensaries with active sales is 86. That'll help. Retail medical sales, 15,718,622. And that started with, in January of 23, 149,611. I won't read each month, but July was 4,429,093. The total application and license fees thus far is $10,210,000. Excise taxes, $529,000. Sales taxes, $622. And I think that number will be updated and changed pretty soon. I think some of that has to be processed. We've got 292 registered practitioners, 21,368 enrolled patients, 104 caregivers, 2,442 work permits. So I guess essentially that's that many new jobs as a result of this industry thus far. Business licenses, cultivators are 57, micro cultivators 57, processors 17, microprocessors 3, disposal 6, transportation 22, and testing 5. And there are 21 applications being processed. So we've got our first speaker today is Robert Welch. Robert, are you ready to go? All right, great. Come on up. I think you've got your presentation loaded up. So
okay, am I coming through? Is that good? All right. And my name is Robert Welch. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm a PharmD, and I'm the director of the National Center for Cannabis Research and Education at the University of Mississippi. And I'd like to share a quick little anecdote, a little story that really happened with one of my neighbors recently. This was a 70-year-old female that we've known for several years. She had recently, well, I would say in the past several months, been diagnosed with focal seizures, so partial seizures. She had talked to her epilepsy physician, had been put on anti-seizure medication, was unable to tolerate that medication for a variety of reasons. So she came off that medication, and her neighbor had experience with getting a medical cannabis certification card. And she said, you know, you really should consider this program. So she goes and gets her certification from the same physician that the friend used, which obviously was not her epilepsy doctor, which she failed to tell she was doing this, by the way. So she goes to the dispensary. They tell her what product, there are a couple of different options, I think, that she had at that time. And they told her that it was going to be about $1,000 per month for this particular product. She decided she couldn't afford that at this time. So she's driving home and sees another sign for a dispensary at the road. It says dispensary on the flag out front. So she goes in this store thinking, well, maybe they'll be a little cheaper, maybe something I can afford. She goes in, gets a product. It was a gummy product. And then she had a terrible reaction from just a couple of days taking this product. It turns out that that was not a dispensary. That was a vape store that just happened to be on the way home, close, very close to a real dispensary, by the way. And this is in Tupelo. I live in Tupelo. And so her comment was, she had to go to the hospital. She was having severe hallucinations and paranoia from this product. So she has sworn off all medical cannabis whatsoever because of this experience. So this leads into the topic today is talking about Delta 8, but it's a little bit more broad than just Delta 8 at this point. But I do want to highlight a few things about Delta 8. But just keep in mind that it's not the only problematic issue we have with some of these scenarios that are occurring out in the marketplace. Let's see. All right. So if we think just real quick, and in this room, the people in this room and on the call, I'm sure this is just going to be a very rudimentary review of the cannabinoid landscape, but I just want to go through it real quick. I like to think of these topics. There we go. I had to press a little hard. So I like to think of it legally in terms of research and then in terms of the marketplace. So we think about legally, and we all know this in this room in particular, the definition, the legal definitions of what marijuana and hemp are. Marijuana being any dry products or any products that come from the biomass of the plant that is over 0.3% THC. Anything less than that is considered from the hemp plant. And we know that pursuant to the 2018 Farm Bill, what that implicates. And that's kind of what we're going to really discuss and dive into a little bit further today. In terms of research, we know that if you think about just the research that has been done for FDA-approved medications, they're really only 4 cannabinoid products. One is plant-based, that's Epidiolex, cannabidiol oral solution for very rare and severe epilepsy syndromes. And then you have 3 THC analogs that are synthetic products. They're for a variety of conditions. I'm not going to go through that botanical drug product pathway at this time. It's not really relevant to our discussion. And then we have the marketplace, the market of medical cannabis, and then this issue of the nutraceutical terminology, which is not really any kind of regulated term. It's not approved by any regulatory agency. It just combines nutrition and pharmaceutical into this nice sounding term. And a lot of things are said about some of these products that are not really supposed to be being said in terms of their benefits medically to patients. And so it becomes very confusing, as we all know, for the patient on what is exactly, what are these products and how do we navigate through some of these issues. So if we look at Delta-8 THC and related cannabinoid products, I just want to start out with a very basic, just kind of a definition of what is Delta-8. So Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol is a cannabinoid that has a double bond isomer of the more well-known Delta-9 THC. Historically, if you said THC, you were talking about Delta-9 THC. That's the most predominant intoxicating cannabinoid found in the plant. CBD or cannabidiol being the most predominant non-intoxicating cannabinoid compound in the plant. And so this was actually, a lot of people think, oh, this Delta-8 stuff is just this new entity that we don't know much about it. And we don't really know a whole lot about it, but it was actually identified in the 40s. So we've known about this particular cannabinoid for a number of years. We know that it can be highly psychoactive in humans. In the 60s, we found out that Delta-8 is found in very negligible amounts in the cannabis plant. As a matter of fact, okay. As a matter of fact, it's actually Delta-8 acid that's found in the plant, just like THC acid and CBD acid. They're all natively found in the plant in the acidic or non-active form, and then you have to decarboxylate the product for it to become activated. So we really still don't know a lot about some of the effects of Delta-8, but we do know that it has a bit less potency than THC, especially in some human studies that have been done. But we'll see in a moment why that may or may not be too relevant when we're talking about some of these products. And I wanted to show just a snippet. I tried to black out these products' names just to not get in trouble with anyone for showing names of products. But this is just an idea. And this is just a random gas station in North Mississippi. I've been in several in Alabama and Tennessee as well. It's the same situation. These products are not just Delta-8. They're Delta-10, THCO, THCP. A number of different cannabinoids now are available in the marketplace. And in my opinion, these products appear to be marketed towards younger folks. It looks like. I mean, they have very attractive packaging, and they're right there usually at the checkout counter when you're paying for your soda or whatnot. And so I wanted to highlight one product in particular. This product, if you can see in the blue box, it has a list of states that are not supposed to be selling this product. Mississippi is one of those states, yet it sits for sale in the shelf. So just to highlight kind of the lack of enforcement, I guess, around some of these issues. And so if we move on to what is the problem here? How have we gotten to this point? And we know that cannabidiol or CBD, we know that it's a non-intoxicating cannabinoid, as I mentioned, as you all know. A lot of hemp farmers and hemp production folks, pursuant to that 2018 Farm Bill, are taking taking the CBD biomass of the product, and they're actually chemically converting the CBD to uber potent formulations of these other cannabinoids, which is not that difficult to do. So they're saying, in essence, that these products they come from hemp. They're less than 0.3% THC in our biomass. So we're on a dry weight basis. So we're good to go. But then they chemically convert these products into a whole host of other cannabinoids that are being packaged and sold. And so the DEA and FDA have sent out various warning letters about these products. Nothing has really changed too much out in the marketplace. So, but I did want to point that out, that they have sent several. I don't know why that did that. Let's see. Sorry. Some of you probably like, well, that was quick. All right. So where was I? Here we go. All right. So if we really, as it is the case with most things, the devil's in the details. So two points I would like to point out about this problem, two critical phases spotlight this problem. So the Farm Bill says all derivatives, whether growing or not. Okay, so that language has really resulted in maybe an unintended result, but nevertheless, it's happened that this particular this situation has created a federally protected, unregulated industry. And I think a lot of you would probably agree with me that this particular situation is, in that example that I gave earlier about that neighbor that I talked to, it's kind of an undermining our legitimate medical cannabis program in the state, unfortunately. And so the reality is that just because something it can be found in trace amounts in the plant doesn't mean that you're supposed to go create uber potent products that have highly intoxicating properties. Okay. And I'll show an example of this with this particular product. This particular product says that there are 5,000 milligrams of cannabinoids in this package with 500 milligrams per serving of a cannabinoid known as THCP. So the potential, the per serving potential for intoxication is in excess of 1,000 milligrams. To put that into perspective, in most adult use markets, max potency is 10 milligrams per serving and 100 milligrams per package. And so I'll show you next why we have done studies that have looked at the potency of different cannabinoids, obviously, and its potential for intoxication. So if you look at the relative potency of some common cannabinoids as compared to native Delta-9 THC found in the plant, you will see that the bar graphs at the bottom, the THC P is actually about 30 times greater potency than native Delta-9 THC. So this world that's easily accessible to patients, both young and old, is a potential problem. And we've seen that actually since the introduction of the Farm Bill in 2018. This particular graph, and I'm sorry that's hard to see. I need to redo that to make it look a little clearer. This is cannabis ingestions in children less than 10 years old. And if you see at the bottom here, at the bottom is basically when these intoxicating hemp-derived cannabinoids became more readily available. And we've seen just a skyrocketing. These are cases per 100,000 in hospital admissions under 10 years old. And so it's just exploded in terms of patient safety is really at risk here. And so just to point out some of that data and speaking about the issue, the second issue that obviously I think everyone can understand in this room is this issue of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. I've already kind of alluded to that, but I just wanted to show a quick example of how that actually bears itself out. If you just look at take the brownie, for instance, okay? So the brownie weighs about 100 grams. So you're gonna get in that particular brownie 150 milligrams of THC. And so now this doesn't, I'm not speaking to the Delta 8 issue here. I'm just speaking about how they kind of skirt around this issue, the 0.3% THC. So just because they have produced from a biomass that was less than 0.3% THC doesn't mean that in that final product, it adheres to those limits. All right, so this particular study I wanted to review real quick. This was published and by us, by some of our PhDs in the lab, in the Waller lab, who do a lot of work for NIDA, which we've done for the last several decades with cannabis research. Dr. Radwan was the lead author here. This was a study that looked at isolation and characterization of impurities in commercially marketed Delta 8 THC products. So this is very relevant to the conversation. So if we look, you know, I've already mentioned that FDA sent out some warning letters. Most of these products have not been evaluated nor approved by the FDA, as we all know, but they are readily available. So between, it does point out that between December 1st, 2020 and February 28th of 22, the FDA received 104 reports of adverse events from patients who consumed these products from different age groups. Oh, I forgot to change it on that, I'm sorry. And so I wanted to highlight one thing in particular here on this slide. Trying to coax it into bringing up my, there we go. So just look, these are just a few examples of some side effects: anxiety, vomiting, dizziness, loss of consciousness, tremors, hallucinations like my neighbor experienced. And so, you know, the problem here is in that we have found in our study, we took, if you just look at this, and this is not to get into the weeds too much on this, that tallest bar is the Delta 8. So there was Delta 8 in the product. And I'll show you why that's kind of important too in a moment about another study we did. But you see all of these other impurities that are found. These are other cannabinoids that aren't supposed to be found in these products, but they are. And so in varying levels. And what we also found was that olivitol was found in this product. Now, olivetic acid, basically, if you find olivitol in your product, that kind of signals that your product is a synthetic product. So these are basically synthetic cannabinoids that have been chemically synthesized, biosynthesized, if you will. So that was one study that we looked at. And then we also did another study. This was in 2020. Dr. Gurley was the lead author. He's one of the PhD pharmacologists at the pharmacy school, or at the Natural Product Center rather. So we looked at content versus label claims and CBD containing products obtained from commercial outlets in the state. So we had DEA agents helped us gather these products. And so we looked at 25 CBD products were analyzed for what they said was on the label, the actual CBD content that was found in the product, the percent of label claim and how far off they were, how accurate they were. Was there any THC in these products? And then were there any synthetic compounds as well? And so we saw that out of the 25, 22 products did have measurable quantities of CBD. 3 were devoid of any phytocannabinoid whatsoever. So if some patients that are buying these products are getting absolutely, they're just basically throwing their money away completely. But that may be a good thing because that it wasn't in there, because we saw some adulterated products. And so the quantity in those 22 products of CBD varied greatly. One of them had 0.02 milligrams. One had 786 milligrams of CBD. And so it's just so varied. The point is that it's very varied and all over the map. If you look at the range, only 3 products were within 20% plus or minus of what they said was in there. And 13 had less than 50% of what they claimed. And finally, and most concerning, is that 3 of the products contain THC in excess of 0.3%. One contained 45% THC. These are products that aren't supposed to have any THC in it. And so these were deemed to have adulterated synthetic cannabinoids is the point there, which is obviously concerning. Now, if we look, finally, I've got, I think, 2 more slides. So if we look at other states and their regulations around Delta 8, I mean, the thing you have to remember about some of this, on the left, Delta 8 is supposedly illegal in these 14 states, but I can tell you that that has really no bearing on, because I've been to some of these places and specifically looked. And so I've not been to all of them, obviously, but I have, and I have friends who live in some of these states that I've asked. So this is a rampant problem. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much enforcement is being done despite the regulations and laws in certain states. And so I just wanted to point that out. And finally, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One is Arkansas. They had a new act that went into effect. Actually, I think recently, I think it was this month, prohibiting the growth, processing, sale, transfer, possession of industrial hemp that contains certain delta tetrahydrocannabinol substances that includes 8, 9, 10, and so forth. Utah has prohibited Delta 8, considering it a Schedule I controlled substance, and it regulates the Delta 8 products under its medical marijuana program. So that's an option that they have taken. I just wanted to point that out. And so despite that, though, there are reports, and I was actually in Utah not too long ago, and I looked for myself, and they're selling this stuff at gas stations out there as well. So despite measures to prevent that, it's still an issue. And so I'm happy to, I'm not sure if we're taking questions now, or I'm happy to answer questions. That's the final slide I had. And I really appreciate your time and attention. And happy to answer questions if we have time. Jeff.
Robert, yeah, and I've got one.
Sure.
Do you know what the states that have made it illegal, how they're going about, to the extent they are? Do they test for the Delta 8? Because you named several other things that are in there too. And is it a full test like the products in the medical marijuana program would have to get?
It varies between those. I just looked at a few that had said it was being managed, like Utah is being managed under their medical cannabis program. Yes, they test those products, but it's obviously not that effective in preventing these products that come from who knows where into the state that are being sold in commerce in either these vape stores or the gas station stores. So I would have to look at each one individually. I didn't do that. I should probably have done that. But
one other question: did you know or notice where the products come from? Are they coming from everywhere, out of the country?
A lot of them are out of the country. Yeah. A lot of them are, and it just, and I'll say this too. A lot of them are very discreet about the parent company, where it comes from. It's hard to discern where these products are coming from sometimes because, they like to, I guess they're keeping a low profile on, because I've looked up some of this information before, say, okay, this product is made by this manufacturer, and you go and you try to find information, and it's very hard to find information about who's making this stuff and where it's coming from. So that's a problem, obviously, too, but that's a good question. Yeah. Hey. Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Hmm. Yeah. That's very helpful. Thank you. That's very good. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comment? Yeah. So, w- so, so THCA is basically just THC acid, which is found naturally occurring in the plant. There are a lot of companies that are claiming that it has effectiveness for so and so forth condition and stuff, but a lot of those claims are not accurate because you really have to decarboxylate that compound to activate it through heating in some way, either drying it or smoking it or whatnot. And so when you see that, just know, and then there are others that, they list CBDA. It's the same thing. If you see the A, that just means it's the acid form of that compound. And to activate it, truly to activate it, you need to decarboxylate it somehow with heat in some manner. Drying. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's the active, psychoactive component. Yeah. Yeah. And some of those products are, you look at the certificate of analysis for some of the, and you'll see a lot of that on those certificates, various different. The other thing about those analysis, those certificates are not real reliable sometimes. Now, the ones that we're getting from our labs for the medical cannabis programs are, those are very accurate because those labs do what they're supposed to do pursuant to our regulations. And so totally different situation with that. That we're talking about kind of this illicit market when we're talking about this stuff. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Last thing from me.
Yes.
Was I right that one of your slides indicated that from the certificate of analysis, some of the products in the stores now had a considerable amount of THC-9 in them even?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which
yeah.
is basically the same things that the
Oh,
dispensary.
well, no, yes and no. Theoretically, if it was pure, it was a purified, yeah. Right. You're exactly right. The compound is they're saying that's the same compound that you would get in legitimate product, but yeah, it's got a lot of other impurities in there. So I hope that's been helpful. Thank you so much. Thank y'all.
Okay. Okay. Could everybody hear that? If you have a question, come up to one of the microphones so people online can hear you as well. Let's see. Next. Thank you, Robert. And Angie Calhoun, who most of you probably know or have met, is our next speaker. She is the Mississippi Cannabis Patients Alliance founder and CEO.
Loud enough, and now you can hear me. Okay, all right, here we go. So I want to make sure that this didn't jump a few slides there, but I think we're at the beginning. A quick overview that I wanted to mention is that when the legislature created the bill, the law, they have the section in there as to what defines the Medical Cannabis Advisory Committee. And there are a number of questions that they would like to have answered. And so today I'm going to go through some of those questions, and because they also address patient needs and issues. And so we're going to start with looking at the cannabis law established the advisory committee that shall be the committee that is required to advise the legislature about medical cannabis, cannabis product, patient care services and industry, the ability to qualify patients in all areas of the state to obtain timely access to high quality medical cannabis, the effectiveness of the medical cannabis establishments in serving the needs of registered qualifying patients, including the provision of education and support services, the reasonableness of their prices at dispensaries, the security issues, sufficiency of the number operating to serve the state's registered qualifying patients, and then the effectiveness of the cannabis testing facilities, the sufficiency of the regulatory and security safeguards contained in this chapter and adopted by the MDOH to ensure access to and use of cannabis cultivated is provided only to the cardholders, and any recommended additions or revisions to the MDOH, MDOR rules and regulations for this chapter, including and relating to security, safe handling, labeling, nomenclature, and whether additional types of licenses should be added. And lastly, any research studies regarding health effects of medical cannabis for patients. Okay, so one big issue we have is the timely access for medical cannabis patients into getting their medical cannabis products. So one thing that hinders that access is that we have a weekly allotment. And that is a real hardship, especially for my patients who are in the rural areas of our state. I live in a rural town myself. And so thankfully we have one within 10 miles of us for Austin, but that is still, it's a hardship for a lot of other patients that are having to drive 50, 60, maybe even more miles than that in just one direction to get their medical cannabis. And what just really pulls my heartstrings is that I've had calls from disabled veterans, and those veterans, and this particular one, he had severe PTSD. He had basically, the phobia of leaving his home, and he did not have legs. It was very difficult for him to get out and to have to go every week. And he did not have anyone that could be a caregiver, because basically he didn't live near his family and he did not have close friends because of his mental health issues. So, and I hear these stories all of the time about how hard it is for the patients to have to get out and to go every week. My opinion is that if deadly opioids can be purchased in a 28+ day period, then the safer alternative of medical cannabis should be no less than 28 days for our patients to go and get their allotment. Now, whether if that patient wants to go and to buy the 28-day allotment at one time, that's up to them. But if they want to go every day, they can do that. And that's the way most states operate. If they want to do it weekly, that's still, something that the patient should have the choice to do. So I would definitely like to see the changes and, to stop the weekly purchase allotment because of the hardship that it creates for our patients. I have looked up and have seen that across the board, most states allow at least a 28-day, if not a 45-day purchasing period for those patients, and to where they can get the complete allotment all at one time. Okay, another issue that is becoming a big problem, it's very heartbreaking, is that we have pain management, mental health physicians who are blocking patients' access to medical cannabis. They have taken a harsh stance and they are saying, okay, we're taking a zero tolerance. And if you use it, we're taking you off of your opioids today and you will be fired from seeing us ever again. This creates a huge problem because really they are supposed to implement a proper taper protocol from opioids. This also could lead and give the patients horrific withdrawal symptoms. I've seen it myself because my mother has had to detox from opioids, and it is a very unpleasant situation, not only for the patient, but for the caregivers as well. This also can lead to the potential overdose death of opioids because say those patients have been off of the opioids for a few days, they're trying to use their medical cannabis, but it's not quite, they haven't figured that out yet. So when those patients go back to say the original dose, or heaven forbid, they go to the illicit market and get something that is much higher than what they were using originally, that's how patients die. And so, medical cannabis is certainly a safer alternative to that. And so we want to figure out a way that we can educate not only our medical cannabis practitioners, but all practitioners about medical cannabis. Because I do believe if we have legitimate information to share with them and have proper taper protocols put in place, even if it just means it's our state, has a proper taper protocol, then we implement that and really make them adhere to following that guideline, because it is really like cruel and unusual punishment to put patients through that all over, them wanting a safer alternative to use for for their pain or whatever condition they're dealing with. And so once we educate all of our patients and our practitioners about the pros and the cons, there are some negative side effects with medical cannabis. Research and the science shows that there are interactions that can occur. And we want everybody to understand and to know that. So, educate the patients about being ready also and willing to try to lower their dosage and usage of their opioids. We need the patients to understand that when they go in to see their opioid prescriber, that they need to be prepared, that let's try to come off of those opioids and hopefully eventually, and I have had a few patients who have totally come off of their opioids. It was a very, very difficult journey for them. But we don't want to see this happening over and over again, because those patients call me, they're crying, they're upset, they're heartbroken, and they just can't understand why any practitioner would be so cold and to just totally rip them off of their prescription medication. But we also, like I said, we need to get the patients to understand that, let's try to lower, if not come off of those opioids, and to use your medical cannabis. Okay. One other thing is the effectiveness of the medical cannabis establishments in serving the needs of registered qualifying patients, including the provision of the reasonableness of their products. Overall, many patients cannot afford what is out there today. It is too expensive. Most of them still have, an insurance they're paying for medical services, but this is not covered by that. And so, if we're looking at overall, patients are still looking at, say, $1,000 a month. There's not many Mississippians that can afford that, y'all. I mean, really and truly. And so, and I have checked across the country and across the board, we are 50 to 70% higher, or their products are less than what our products are running here in Mississippi. And for me, I don't just represent the elite few of patients. I'm talking about the rural patients. I'm talking about Medicare patients, people who cannot work, who are on disability, our disabled veterans who are making peanuts. And so, if we're going to make this a legitimate medical program, we've got to have ways for us to help every single patient, not just the elite few. And so I would also like to say that we need to also figure out a way to have our practitioner visits also to be more cost effective, because many patients just are like, I'll just have to go back to the illicit market. And that's where we have a lot of problems. Maybe they'll go to the gas station and buy gas station weed, and they get something that is very contaminated and harmful for them. So, we've got to have ways and programs to help those who are not able to afford the prices that we have now. Okay. Another issue is that how do we address educational and awareness information? So the effectiveness of the medical cannabis establishments in serving the needs of registered qualifying patients, including the provision of educational and support services by dispensaries. So this is needed not only for dispensary agents, but for our practitioners. We need this information for everyone involved, and that information needs to filter on down the road to our patients. We need legitimate sources. There are people, there are physicians and researchers from around the world, including the University of Mississippi, that has very, very valuable information that we can share with our patients. Some of the topics that I've learned about is, and that are so very important, is that we need to make sure that our patients understand that actual products and medical cannabis can be very, very beneficial at under 10%. And around the world, the research actually shows that even 5% with very high CBD and other cannabinoids can be very, very beneficial. And they do not have the psychoactive effects of the THC, because with CBD, it helps to negate that high. We need to make sure very sure, especially with the higher THC contents that we have, that we encourage our patients to start low and to go slow, to microdose, how to titrate properly. That is, we've got to make sure that they understand that you don't just go in and take, that entire brownie or that, and I mean, most of the gummies are, they're very small, but they have 10 milligrams. 10 milligrams would knock me out and I would not be able to function. And that is something that is just really, we've got to have variation and things that are beneficial, because patients, I mean, they're sick. They already don't feel like doing things. They don't want to do something, that's going to impair them and put them back in the bed. They want to be able to feel good, just like Austin did when we went to Colorado and got his medicine. He was able to function. He was able to get out and go and do things and eventually start to work. And that's what I want for our patients. There are benefits to the other cannabinoids. There are many, many cannabinoids out there, but CBD, CBG, CBDA, as we talked about the acids, CBGA, and there are many, many more. We also need to teach our patients how to read a COA and to know what ratios work best for them. We know, all of us do, that we really don't need to call it by a strain name anymore. They don't mean anything, because if one company's cultivating XYZ and the other says he's cultivating XYZ, they're not the same. They're not going to test the same. And we all know that it will not, because they vary from one mom to another. Okay, if patients are scanning the QR codes on the label and no COA is available for the patients to read, then how do those patients know if it is high quality medical cannabis grown in Mississippi? Because they don't. And I'm telling you, I've scanned over 20. Austin has scanned many. Very, very few actually pull up a COA, and it is unacceptable from our industry, whoever it may be, that our patients can't pull up and get the information that they need and deserve. Because if they can see what the amounts of THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids, terpenes are in those products, they will very quickly learn to go into a dispensary and say, I need this for my medical condition, and not to just rely on a fictitious name. And that really doesn't mean anything. And so, I would even go so far to get this corrected as, asking our legislators to look at implementing severe penalties and fines for any product that is being sold out of a dispensary, for the dispensary and for the producer, because this is just, it's not acceptable. We need to do better. Patients deserve better than that. So one potential addition of medical cannabis, medical conditions with restrictions, a way that we could look at, and I know we all, talk about how we want to add anxiety, depression, insomnia to our list of conditions. But, so much of the product that's being sold today has very high concentrations of THC. Actual data, science, research shows that people with anxiety and depression, if you give them a 20, 30% THC, and they definitely are going to have a psychotic episode, the onset of schizophrenia. And it's not a pleasant feeling for them. I have a mother that is schizophrenic. It's not pleasant for the caregivers. It's terrible. So do we want to inhibit that, or do we want to find a way that we can actually help people with anxiety and depression, insomnia, but to make it to where they can only use low amounts of THC with very high CBD, because CBD actually has been proven to work very, very well for those conditions. Typically, the THC concentrations under 10% combined with high CBD will not cause the unwanted side effects, while giving patients the intended relief that they desire. This allows the patients to function, work, and to enjoy their quality of life with their families and friends. So I would just encourage us to maybe think about how we can actually come up with products that could work for anxiety and depression and insomnia, but at a much lower THC amount because, like I said, the science, the research shows that we need to, have something in a much lower content for those patients to be beneficial. The last thing that the advisory committee is, required to look at is any research studies regarding health effects of medical cannabis for the patients. Mississippi has a rich history of medical cannabis research through its federal program at the University of Mississippi. Now we need to be dedicated to continuing that legacy through our state's medical cannabis program. Through a collaborative effort abroad, we can make Mississippi a leader in medical cannabis research. But what we need the community across the board to have a desire to want to learn more about cannabis in order to better educate and inform our patients, our practitioners, to make Mississippi a leader in the medical cannabis world. But what we've also got to have is we need funding, and research is not cheap. It costs money. And so overall, medical cannabis research has been left out of the program altogether thus far by all parties involved. But we can't be leaders if we don't put any effort into being one. Research tools can answer many of the questions also that the law wants the advisory board to find out. There are some simple apps that can be implemented and used by the board, and we can answer those questions very, very easily. Okay. So how do we meet the needs of patients while also helping to resolve a lot of these issues? By providing extra funding to the Mississippi Department of Health's program, the MDOR, for the hiring and immediate implementation of an educational research director and/or agency to oversee the education and research needs of the medical cannabis program. Education and informational tools for patients, practitioners, for the dispensary agents are very, very much needed and lacking. We need to launch research efforts and programs. So that funding could be very, very beneficial in helping with that. The other entities that we run into a lot, I recently went down to the coast to the Police Chiefs Association with MDOR and MSDH to, educate our law enforcement about medical cannabis. They're hungry, they're eager to know. We have, judges that need to be updated. I just went to court with a patient and, that's not fun nor easy. Our schools need to know what's allowed and what's not. The universities are asking about what's acceptable. Well, if you don't allow people to smoke on campus, the patients can't smoke on campus, but you can't stop them from using their medicine. And so, we want them to treat it like any other prescription medication. Our assisted living and nursing homes, I was recently in Oxford, talking to the Elder Care Law Conference about that. But our state, county, and city officials, they are eager to know and understand things better. But if we have a division of some sort that can help, our medical cannabis program with that, it would be very, very beneficial for our patients. And obviously, because of laws, judges that are, still out there, trying to say that we're going to take your kids away from you because you're using medical cannabis. I don't care if you have a card. That's not fair. So these are things that are very beneficial to helping our patients. Okay, as you know, Mississippi is in a healthcare crisis due to the Department of Health's lack of funding. Yes, they get a great deal of funding from our federal government, but as we all know, and Ole Miss knows, that comes with a whole bunch of red tape and restrictions on it. So to me, I think that our medical cannabis program could actually be the answer to helping with this healthcare crisis. So by legislators appropriating funding to the Mississippi Department of Health from the licensing fees, penalties, fees, tax revenue generated from the medical cannabis in Mississippi, instead of it being dumped into the general fund, let's put that money back towards our healthcare system. 100% of the tax revenues from sales fees generated should be allocated to the Department of Health, where a specific amount is then allocated directly towards our medical cannabis program. As you can see, we need, they need more employees so that they can work better for all of you that are in the industry and for our patients. We also need to help, have education and awareness information for the patients and practitioners, for the dispensary agents as well. And the MDOR would get a portion to help fund that effort there. The remaining funds could work wonders in helping our patients, all patients across our state. We have people in many of the rural areas that do not have healthcare facility access. And we have an epidemic of babies that are dying because their parents, their mothers didn't get the care that they needed. And, this is just something that is just unacceptable. We've got to help all people. And, and to me, when this program was brought about, that's what, I dreamed that it was for everybody and that it would help our state in so many different ways. And so there is a real struggle with our healthcare in Mississippi, and medical cannabis could be a big part of resolving this crisis in multiple ways, because medical cannabis products are helping over 21,000 patients across the state already. But that extra revenue that's being brought in could help so many other people. And so that's what I believe is what we should be looking at. Many of you may or may not know, but our Department of Education receives about $3.1 billion from our legislators each year, with an additional $120 million for education for K through 12. And they deserve that and more, that is for sure. We need smart, intelligent people. But, people that are sick, they're not going to go to school. They may not finish school. And some of those babies may not ever make it to school because they didn't have quality health care. So from what I could tell, I'm not 100% on this, but our Department of Health received about $48 million to operate, which is substantially less than education. But healthcare for Mississippians, it needs to be prioritized. We need to take care of our own, and this program can help to take care of our patients. So I kind of came up with a little motto of, wouldn't healthy and educated Mississippians with good paying jobs result in a better Mississippi for everyone? This program has already brought in almost, we had how many work permits? About 2,500. We are getting patients better and to where they can actually go back to work. And so, there are a lot of good things that has come about of this, and we can do a lot more, but I just don't believe it's right for all of the, the taxation, the licensing fees to not benefit the Department of Health or to be just dumped over into the general fund. We need to know where this money's going and to make it to where it's helping our patients across our state. And so that is all I have.
Thank you, Angie. Has anybody got any questions? Angie?
Thank you.
You may want to go to the microphone, please.
The green, yeah. We got to mash these little buttons.
Sorry about that. So talking about access and everything being cheaper for veterans and for other patients in the state of Mississippi, if the weekly allotment was removed and you could buy at the monthly and get everything, wouldn't that immediately allow people to buy in bulk and therefore save money and have cheaper products for them?
Yeah, I actually thought about that, and it certainly should, because right now, our producers are having to spend a ton of money on putting an eighth of a gram of flour into a pretty little package and, put all of that information on there. So yeah, obviously it would cut down on the packaging, the waste, and therefore if they're, buying in their 28 day, say if it's a 28-day supply they can get, it would be far more beneficial. And it would be really helpful.
Do you have any information about what some other states do with regard to their either Department of Health, and I know some have a separate cannabis commission
Mhm.
in terms of funding? Have you had a chance to, I mean, I have no idea, so I was just.
Yeah, you know, it ranges across the board. You know, I have pulled up what funding has been done for research, for patient education. Only one state actually has allocated money for patient education for their practitioners and agents. But Michigan, several years ago, actually funded, if I'm not mistaken, about $60 million to research for medical cannabis. That actually didn't all stay in state. They actually sent some of it over to California to be done. But we see it anywhere from, you know, some might give a couple of million, but anywhere up to, you know, 60 million. We anticipate that, you know, if we could look at potentially, say, 25 million over a 5-year period for medical cannabis research. But of course, that's just for the research part. That's not for education and all. But, you know, it is extremely important that, you know, our patients are well informed. Research produces legitimate education, and that is what makes the difference in having a high quality medical cannabis program that works.
Anybody
Mr.
else?
Chairman, I do think it's important, as over the last year, I've been talking to other state health officers, other health departments that are involved in their cannabis programs. And there are several states that have assigned that to health, like we have. The difference is our scope is enormously larger than anybody else that I've talked to, that in terms of health departments administering their medical cannabis programs. So, you know, for us, and we have the lion's share of our program, from cultivation all the way to arriving at the dispensary. But it is a fairly comprehensive amount of responsibility that we have, which a lot of people just don't realize. And so I'm really pleased with how the program is maturing and continues to improve. And, you know, I'm totally satisfied with the amount of responsibility that we have, but as far as I know, every other state has significantly less responsibility at health than we do.
What are the other states? Are they kind of a separate agency or a sub-agency of health department?
Well, I think most states have cultivation with Department of Agriculture, and agriculture is with us. And we're used to growing bacteria, but, you know, not crops.
Right.
But we've learned.
Right. Well, do you have any ideas, or is it, you satisfied with that structure? Or do you think that should be changed, or is that something just kind of wait and see how time?
Yeah, I would, you know, wait and see. I mean, I don't have any complaints over our jurisdiction. Just answering your question, I think it would cause more turmoil to try to move things around at this point and let the program continue to mature. At some point down the road, it may, you know, make more sense. But right now, I think it should stay like it is.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we've got the dispensary's perspective from 2 dispensary owners and operators, George Reese and Bobby Britton. I'm not sure which one is chosen to go first, but we're happy to have you.
Testing, testing. Can everybody hear me? All right. We don't have a slideshow, but we do have some papers to give out. We weren't that prepared, but we do have the papers. So my name is Bobby Britton. I currently operate 3 dispensaries right now. One is located in Mendenhall, Forest, as well as Richland, Mississippi. George operates out of Vicksburg. So what we're going to be handing out today is simply who we use for our POS, COVA, if y'all have heard of it. And so when new patients or returning patients are coming in, we're having to track the seed to cell tracking. So we rely solely on COVA to integrate with Metric. And so we're going to pass out some examples. That way you guys can actually see from our point of view. So you can have that.
So this first example will be a comparison of Metric and COVA. The top sheet will be Metric.
And I have already, I've been fined already twice. One time in Mendenhall and one time in Richland. And we immediately contacted COVA regarding the issue, and they did send a massive wide update. And I had to meet with the agent pertaining all of this. And so before we get into all this, in my system, the owner, the manager, inventory manager, and bud tender is not even allowed to override a sale. Nobody can in the whole system. But unfortunately, this did not happen to me. It did allow it. So we oversold within that 7-day period, which is 21 grams. And so we really didn't know what to tell the agent, but the agent had it as clear as day, the Metric report, that we did oversell. But I will tell you this, that I would never take a profit from a $35 eighth, and trade that for a $10,000 fine. I would never, ever do that. So what the agent told me to do is that I should be checking Metric solely and not counting on COVA for this integration, which is very, very difficult, because now we have the flour and the pre-rolls. Those are in grams, and that's pretty easy to keep up with if you're talking 21 and 84 grams. But what about a 0.3 of a gram of concentrates? Now you have to do a conversion, because the concentrates are read different. They're not read in grams of how Metric is being read. So there's a bunch of different conversions that we would have to do. Now the edibles, for instance, 100 milligrams of edibles equals 3.5 grams. When you get to 250 milligrams, the math kind of throws it all out of whack. And also there's another example where if we ring up a 3.58, that might come out to what, 3.52, George, for instance?
Go ahead. Just to be clear, that first example is the same patient. It's a comparison of Metric and COVA. And you can really tell which one's the easier one to read, just as an individual. We're not mathematicians. We kind of just have to rely on the tools we're given.
Yeah, so now we're having to have a conversion calculators and have to have an iPad or a tablet to actually figure out each conversion. And you know what? I've been in the dispensaries hands-on at all 3 locations, and a lot of patients are saying, no, I don't want that. Can you put that back? Bring me something else. So now we're having to take it on and off. I'm having to do another conversion. I'm having to add some track. So if we're solely looking at Metric, it is going to be very, very challenging. It's going to take a lot more time to actually do those conversions to make sure that we are allocating proper dosages to our patients for the 7 days. And that has become another job in itself, because we can't afford to keep paying those fines. It's not worth $10,000 to for a $35 eighth, not one bit. And with that being said, if the 7-day was taken away, that's less room for that era. And being in the dispensaries all the time, that is the biggest complaint that I have seen from a patient standpoint, and I'm a patient as well. And I personally like to get 2 to 3 weeks worth at a time instead of having to go, every week. Sometimes my schedule changes, so I can't get that, and I lose time on that 7 days, and it's not fair. But I have seen patients cry. I have seen patients cuss me out. I have seen patients call Metric right there, the call in the state. I've seen a bunch of stuff. And now with how the fines are going. If it gets even close to that 21 grams, if it gets to 19 or 20, I'm probably not going to sell them because now I'm nervous about getting a $10,000 fine. It's very overwhelming, and it makes me think twice about doing more of these or further in expansion in this business. But that's what I'm seeing from a dispensary standpoint. Mostly is the fines, the integration between Metric and whoever your point of sale system is. This is not just COVID. This is other POS systems too that are having this issue. I would like to ask if we could just have a little bit of a leeway on that. I mean, take it maybe case by case basis, but I would never trade a $10,000 fine for a profit on $35, never. And that's pretty much all I have to say as far as the biggest issue in our dispensaries being the 7-day allotment, and also reducing possible fines in the future, because we're not in the business to get fined, in the business to help the patients. So
just to top that off, the allotment, like you said, over time, the patients are really missing out on their full 6 units. Of course, we use grams in the dispensary because units are a little confusing. But we just really, in the end, we just want to make sure the patients get the medicine they deserve. And as a patient myself, you know, I feel like I'm in the same boat.
Questions? Can you come up to the microphone, please, for our people that are on Zoom?
Oh, there we go. Is that better? Okay, I feel your pain. This is a problem that's going on statewide. And I will point out, one of the issues is that the MMCEU is not compatible with Metric. And then Metric is not compatible with COVA. Now, what's happening, your problem, you got fined when you went over because you were trying to get them up to their allotment. In a lot of instances, COVA is actually automatically rounding up. And now this is a problem that is building on itself. We do have I've got an expert who has analyzed this and actually has broken down where the problem is and helped us to tell how to calculate this so we don't run into problems. But where we are in Mississippi and where our patients are is they are getting undercut their allotments, because we're having to round up when it gets to COVA or whoever your POS is. And so over the year, by the end of this year, we will have undercut a lot of the patients their allotments, because every week, doing it under the weekly.
0.02?
Yep. And so every week, they're getting shortcut, and then every week, and then by the end of the year, it's going to add up. Which one, there's 2 things that can be done, which is to, one, maybe rethink the MMCEUs so that we're using, you know, instead of measuring milk and using pounds to weigh milk, we're using gallons to weigh gallons, which is not what we're doing now, which is why you've had the problems with the concentrates. They're not compatible and the conversions are not there in the system. So, and that was just something, you know, it's live and learn from Mississippi. And when we came up with our weighted system, we came up with something, but we didn't encounter and count for using Metric. And then when we hired Metric, and then it you know, kind of created, and then things like COVA are rounding up to self-fix the problem. But I hear you, and that is a huge problem. And that is one that I think, we don't know, we haven't really gotten any answers. And we've called Metric, and we've called others, and we've called, and I think, and I'm sorry, they say, call the state, and Metric says, call the state, and the state says, call Metric, and it's a back and forth, but it's not resolved, but it is something that needs to be fixed sooner than later, because every week you're shortcutting people their allotments.
Thanks. And plenty of emails and phone calls between Metric support and COVA support, kind of prove the proactiveness between, dispensary owners and bud tenders. So we're not just, sitting on our hands. We run extensive inventory. I'm sure the growers even more so, but it's we're doing everything we can.
Any other questions?
Bobby, am I right that you maybe not have to, but practically speaking, you have to have a point of sale software system to interact with Metric, as I understand it? Metric, I think there's some references that you can use Metric for that, but I don't think anybody in the country does that I'm aware of. Do you have any different comments on that?
Are you referring to the actually calculation of their allotment at that time? That's integrated?
Talking about using Metric instead of COVA or Dutchie, or Metric standalone to operate your store. Does anybody do that or able to do that?
No, sir. We were under the impression that COVA was invested in the state of Mississippi and that they're in full compliance with our laws and regulations and that they're integrated with Metric. So we were solely relying on that POS to do the calculations for us, and we have it in there where we can't even override anything. I mean, nobody can. So that's how I want it on all of our stores. That's how it should be. I mean, if this is going to be a rule and regulation, I feel like it should be that way.
Anybody?
Thing on. So I'm actually George's neighbor. I moved here from California to bring our knowledge from California to this business here. I applaud the health department for instituting Metric so quick. In California, it took us over 2 years from the date we were supposed to initiate it to when we actually did. It's all the delays, all the problems, and all the hiccups. Some of the problems that I do see with this is exactly what they're saying. We have a different software system than them, one that I've used for a long time, never had an issue with, Trees. And we're having the same issues. It's selling over. And I've had to go to my ABC rep and show him, here is Trees, here's the data, Trees talking to Metric, the query, how many does the customer allowed to buy? Yes, allowed to buy. And then it shows the transaction going through and reporting right away. I hand him the data and he says, I don't understand this. All I care about is what Metric says. Even though I hand him the data that shows, nope, Metric authorized it right here. They're talking to each other, live time. We haven't had a fine yet. We've just had queries about it, and it's happened a couple times now. So, I agree with these gentlemen here. If you're a small business owner and you're sinking all of your money to stay afloat in a market that's not steady yet, a market that's not ready yet, and you're leading the way to bring these medicines to people to help them, and you're investing all your time and money into it, but you're getting slapped on the wrist and losing money that you don't have in the first place for a problem that's a systemic problem from Metric communicating with all these other softwares. And that's something I think, some education on what is going wrong with the problem with with ABC, so they understand, they can see where it's at, see where the owner is not going, hey, I'm gonna sell you a bunch over, you'll make some extra money here. They can actually see the transactions. If it's over a 0.2, or, there's got to be a little leadway, there's got to be a little bit of understanding while we're all learning this process and instituting it into the Mississippi system. And that's, it's all working together to make everything to get through. If you got someone who's blatantly just, selling stuff out the back door, I get it. But if everyone's following the rules and you're proving that you're following the rules, then, it should be very easy for the governing bodies to go, okay, we can work with this, we can figure out the problems, we can make this happen.
Yes, the ABC agent, he stated that you should not be looking at COVA, you should be looking at Metric the whole time during the whole process. And that would be a lot more added processes to actually just even service a patient, especially when you have to convert all those numbers over that are milligrams or concentrates.
You know, we actually this into metric. A little leeway in there in reference to fines, at least give a a no fines or something like that, or a warning until we're able to work this out collectively.
All right, any other questions? Great, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
All right, next, we've got two attorneys that have been very active in this program since, well, since really before the beginning with the initiative and also with implementation with both of them have a number of clients and help sometimes get paid for it, sometimes they don't, but they're always willing to help folks out and probably know these rules and regulations and laws as well as anybody in the state. Dudley Lampton and Connor Reeves.
Can everybody hear me? All right. So as Jeff said, my name is Dudley Lampton. I'm an attorney in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. I do real estate law. Cannabis law is not necessarily my bread and butter. However, I have been here since Initiative 65 and I've seen how this has progressed and developed. You know, the way I got wrapped into this presentation was my good friend Jeff called me about 2 weeks ago and he said, Dudley, we're going to have a committee meeting and it's going to be on a lot of topics due to cannabis. One of these topics that I kind of want people to discuss is these fines and citations that these cannabis establishments are getting. And I would like for you to present. And I thought it was a joke because if anybody knows me, which a lot of people in this room know me, I'm not a good presenter and I'm a horrible speaker. So I said, Jeff, just give me about 5 minutes and let me think about this. And while I was debating on whether or not presenting, I realized what Jeff really needs is an attorney that has a good rapport with these regulators and heaven forbid if he has to go before a judge and argue these really complex legal matters that are derived from the program, he could be able to do that eloquently. Not only that, I probably need somebody to pick me up after I stumble so poorly on this presentation. So the man of the hour is going to be Connor Reeves after this, and there's no pressure, Connor, but that's kind of what we have today. And if you have this handout, basically what we have is only 2 pages. There's 3 sections in it. The first section is just a nice refresher, which Miss Angie talked about, is why we're here today. The other 2 sections is kind of what I told Jeff is, hey, I want to try to stay in my lane. I will conduct some research. And if I find a pattern of some issues, I will address them here today. And so the way I was able to conduct this research is first I did initial analysis. And then I went on into somewhat of a community outreach information collection on some of these fines and issues. And then, of course, number 3 is my opinion on kind of what I found. So let's start from the get-go. Why are we here today? And there's 2 reasons why I wanted to point out, and Angie did a great job. The first point is this committee was formed due to Section 33 of the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Act. And in this section, it said the committee is, its purpose is to evaluate and put recommendations out to not only the legislators, but also our regulators. And they have 6 topics, which are paraphrased here, but I have them written word for word what they have in the statute. And one of the major things I want to bring up is number 1. Helping patients gain access. We had a huge issue with this at the very beginning. I mean, we had people wandering into dispensary saying, I'm 50, 60, 70 years old. I don't necessarily know how to work a computer, and I don't know how to upload this information to the portal. And this was actually the first time I ever witnessed a full-blown commitment on all sides to try to get this addressed. I mean, first, I saw the cannabis establishments reach out to their legislators. The legislators said, hey, there is a problem that needs to be addressed. And then sooner or later, the regulators got involved, and they did an incredible job implementing and to great success. And when I mean great success, I mean an overly positive impact. Patients that were backed up for months are now have their cards and are able to get their cards within 10 days. And I really believe that this was a foundational positive element that really I wanted to personally thank and, carve out a little bit of this presentation to talk about. And not only that, but I did conduct some research, and the reason why I'm here today is hopefully that these research will start getting people in this room to ask the right questions that will lead to the right answers that will hopefully lead to a better program. So without further ado, let's get into it. So there's 2 parts of this analysis. The first part is a legal analysis. And really what I was trying to do here, if you look on page 2, is I just wanted to have a detailed review of kind of the applicable laws and what's relevant to the cannabis industry. The first thing that you'll see is, the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Act plus the amendments. And then subsequently after that, you have the regulations. And then if you look at section 3 and 4, what is really funny about this is, and what it says is the implementation and enforcement of these laws by both the Department of Health and Revenue and the Mississippi Department of Health and Revenue's interpretation and application of the law when conducting investigations and issuing fines. That's really what the heart of my research was. And what was really funny is I was hoping I was going to be able to sit behind a desk and look at all these public records, but I had forgotten that we actually amended that to where you kind of had more of a closed setting, which is probably better to, talk about these matters behind closed doors. But for me, what that meant was I was actually going to have to do step 2 of this process, which was actually go out and talk to these regulators. But before that, I just kind of want to give you a brief overview of the number of pages it kind of takes to assess all of these regulations. And this is 445 pages of the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Act, of course, the amendments, processing regulations, cultivation regulations, commercial transport. If you really look at these, it's around 900 pages of analysis. Now, of course, if you're an attorney like me, you kind of know the ins and outs and you can kind of cut the fat off. And even when I try to cut the fat off, it's about 500 pages. And when you're thinking about this, think about a cannabis establishment, a mom and pop store that got in this for the right reason and is trying to help patients. They're going to have to deal with this every single day. And kind of what I hit on is not only do you have to assess these regulations, but they're always evolving. Just like me saying, oh, I'll just sit behind a desk and review these regulations. No, I won't. We already amended that. So it's always nice to really see what it looks like from a bird's eye view in some of these cannabis establishments. Now, of course, like I said, one of the major things that I wanted to look at is how these departments enforce their laws, enforce these regulations, and how when they were issuing fines, how they were able to apply the law and interpret the law. That seems to be a very, very big topic. In fact, this is kind of part 2, my community outreach. I actually did go out and talk to around 20 licensees on the retail side. And then I also went and looked at the cultivation facilities and talked to them. The reason why there's only 5 for the cultivation is I was pretty easily figured out kind of what the problem was and the issue there. And you can see that on number 3A1. Basically what I was seeing is there's a lack of clarity on both the Mississippi cannabis regulations and then having somewhat of a lack of clarity and lack of follow-up from the departments kind of saying, hey, yeah, this has happened, but this is the reason why it happened. And a great example of that is kind of some of our industry leaders. They got in trouble at the very beginning. They saw, their crops being burned, and all of these independent guys are calling me saying, what's the reason? What's the reason? I was like, well, there's a lot of reasons, but what is the reason, Dudley, for the burning? And to be honest, I still don't know to this day. And I think it would be good for, some of these cultivators to really know why, what things that they need to address to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because if that happens to these small guys, it's game over. It's bankruptcy for them. Another thing that I realized when I reached out to these retail facilities is the actual issue at hand. And Bobby has addressed it here. You heard Angie Calhoun address it here. And really what I'm looking at from a bird's eye view is a heavy reliance on novel third-party tracking software that has created a learning curve for both regulators, software companies, and cannabis establishment. And the part I need to clarify is the novel part. Metric has been around for over 10 years. COVA's been around. All of these POS systems that you were hearing today, all of them have been around for a while. What's novel about it is the fact that these software companies are having to develop and implement software around our new regulations. And some of these, like the MMCEUs, the only one I've really seen that stands out is Missouri. Another one that is very novel, and one of the major issues that we're seeing is these rolling 7 days. And that's kind of what you're seeing is kind of these software companies, not necessarily, bad actors or whatnot, just trying to get it together and process and make this right. In fact, if you look at Metric, they have about 7 different updates on the Metric manual. And in fact, I have the Metric manual here. It's about 187 pages long. And what seems to be happening is these fines that are derived from the regulation that are on these back pages are somehow being addressed in these Metric manual that, as for me, it was very humbling. In fact, if you look at my final page, I have my professional opinion, and I've marked out professional because it's so new to me. I just felt like it wasn't necessarily my professional opinion more. It's just an opinion. Moving on. And these are kind of the issues that I was telling you about today. But another issue that I do want to bring up that I think a lot of people are kind of missing is, all of these cannabis establishments are somewhat nervous and running scared. I mean, you even heard Bobby today with these rounding issues that if they're not, they can't risk $10,000, and take that on the chin. But also what they can't do is drive people away when they haven't met their metric units. And, I think these regulators are really going to figure this out and solve it. I think it's going to take a lot of our help, just like we saw in this patient access issue. It's going to take all of us sitting down and really trying to assess the situation. But the real main issue, and I'll leave it here today, is what I've realized talking to all these regulators, talking to all of these cannabis establishments, talking to the POS systems, trying to talk to Metric, is operator errors that are easy to address and could be used as a productive learning tool are being overshadowed by exorbitant fines. And that's really what you have here. This wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't a $5, $10, $20, $1,000 fine starting off. If we were able to use this as a learning tool and not have everybody freaked out, running scared that they're about to lose their license and go bankrupt, I think that would alleviate a lot. And I know you've talked about fines. I know it's a very hard issue to address, and I'm hoping that legislators can help with that, Laura. With that being said, that's kind of the end of my presentation. And I will leave it at this. There was a poem that I had to memorize in 5th grade, and it was, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And it's very interesting to try to apply that concept to here, because what you're saying here is if at first you don't succeed, you may go bankrupt. And that's not the overall result that we want. And we're going to help to change that. Any questions? Thank goodness.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have questions. I have comments.
Okay.
So first of all, we don't burn crops for obvious reasons. We do order destruction and under observation in a very specified manner. And every action that we have taken thus far has been through consent orders, which means we come together and we agree. And there is no confusion on what the violations are with those who are being sanctioned. It's very clear. Now, we don't go out and talk all that. The end product is a public document. It's public information. Usually those who are being sanctioned don't want us talking about it, but they know. And then what we do at the program is we will post on our website, we'll add to the FAQs what we're seeing and what violations are happening and what to expect with this violation. It's very clear.
Thank you for that clarification.
And now in terms of the regulations, we can always clean that up.
Amen.
And we're very happy, to work with the community to do that. But please understand, make no mistake, the Department of Health is here in this program for one reason, and that is to protect the public. We are not here to promote the industry. We're not here to grow the program, although we facilitate it every way that we can in a healthy manner. I'm working with providers to be more comfortable with the program as a medical model. But my duty as a state health officer is to protect the public. And that's what we do with all of our programs. So our rules and regulations are there through the lens of public safety, first and foremost. And then where we can make accommodations in a safe and respectful manner with the industry, I'm always happy to.
And I really appreciate that clarification. I think mine was more derived of a lot of these growers were calling me and they still didn't necessarily know where to find that information. So that would be really good.
We communicate to them all the time. Laura and Callie spend countless hours talking to all of our licensees, providing technical assistance. I will remind y'all, the first 6 months of my tenure, I took a lot of heat because I chose the approach of providing technical assistance for issues that did not endanger the public or the evidence of diversion. And I can tell you, every order that I have signed has been related to illegal plants, every last one of them. And we're not going to tolerate illegal plants in the program. That is a non-starter. Unless there's statute that requires us to. If a plant is not in the program, then it is illegal and it has to be destroyed.
And when you say illegal, does that just mean not tagged in the metric
Not
system?
tagged,
Okay.
not transparent, where this plant is,
Okay.
at what stage of development, where it is in transportation and processing. But we have provided an awful lot of technical assistance over this last year and a half and have guided a lot of folks with corrective action plans with no sanctions. And I'm gonna tell you, everybody we've worked with have been very compliant. And I will tell you, behavior right now from our licensees is much different than it was a year ago.
Yes, I
And
completely agree on that.
We had a lot of licensees who were pushing the boundaries on us. And we had to show where that boundary was very clearly. But we worked with them respectfully and clearly, and then we try to translate that to the rest of our licensees. That go to the website, look at the FAQ page, and you'll see it. And then we work with the trade associations and the patient advocacy groups to try to communicate all that we can.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Anyone else? All right, Connor, take it away.
Thanks, Dudley. I'm not sure if I could audio that. I'm not going to add another PowerPoint to the day, and I'm the last one up, so I really don't want to keep everybody too long. First off, thank you for the invitation today. Again, my name is Connor Reeves. I'm an attorney here in Jackson with a small firm, McLaughlin PC. We specialize working with clients in highly regulated industries. We did a lot of work previously in alcohol manufacturing, food manufacturing. We help breweries and distilleries all over the country. We work with tech startup companies and now medical cannabis. I got my start doing this back in 2018. I joined the Initiative 65 campaign as their medical policy advisor after coming off of being general counsel at the State Medical Association, where I did a lot of work with doctors in our state, like Dr. Edney, Dr. Turner. Did a lot of work at the Board of Medical Licensure, sat in on meetings with Board of Nursing and Board of Pharmacy and at the Capitol as well. And now I get to help patients, excuse me, get to help my clients who are in the industry. So we began back in 2018 with the campaign. And then after the program finally got launched, we've helped our clients get through licensure. And now we are working with folks that are dealing with compliance issues. It's at first we did a lot of work on the licensure side, then nobody called me for a few months. I figured everything was going really smoothly. Now I'm starting to get phone calls again as folks are getting up off the ground. They're running their businesses and they're realizing it's probably more complicated than they thought initially. They're doing their best to try to review the regulations, but still there are some compliance issues that are out there. You know, but first, before I go into any more detail, I do want to say how much I appreciate the agencies for all of their work. It is a tremendously huge job that they had to do in a very short amount of time. As somebody alluded to earlier, a lot of states, their legislatures passed these medical cannabis programs through the legislature, and they said, oh, well, it'll kick off in 3 years or even longer than that. And ours was obviously a much shorter timeline. So it's not lost on me the amount of work that had to be done on the regulatory side, not only to write regs, but also to launch a program. And the fact that we have 350 plus businesses and over 20,000 patients at this juncture, it really is, I'm really impressed by it. You look around the country, it's really a solid program, especially for how new it is. So I appreciate all the work the agencies do. And now we're moving into enforcement. What I tell my clients when we start talking about this initially is like, enforcement is good, right? Enforcement of the regulations is a good thing. We need a well enforced program. It's good to do that for a lot of reasons. One, it sets expectations for licensees and the public. I mean, what Dr. Eddy just said is that's the most important thing. It's for the patient's benefit. If you look at a state like Oklahoma, or there's some others that weren't well regulated out of the gate, now they're trying to regulate, and it's hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube once you've really started. And for a new program like ours, it's so important to find the balance between really two sides. You've got agencies, not just Mississippi, but anywhere really, that could be too lax. If your agency is too lax on enforcement, that's bad because it really encourages maybe bad actors to come into the state because they found out it's not too hard to, skirt the rules in that state. But also it puts a lot of pressure on businesses that are maybe not doing so well financially, and they realize they could probably, cut some corners here because money isn't so good this month. And that's not good either because they realize that, we're not going to get in trouble probably. So, and ultimately though, that's not good for the patients. The other side of that though is if it's too heavy handed, you're starting to scare away licensees. You're risking folks not renewing their licenses. They're getting frustrated. They're shutting their doors. They're concerned they're going to get a fine that could cripple their business next month, even if they're following the rules. Even worse though, is if you are in balance of that, you could have an agency that is trying to be balanced, but doesn't follow their own rules or is inserting rules into regulations that aren't really there. We're not speaking about anything in particular that I've seen, but just saying it's something that does occur. When that happens, you get licensees that get really upset and they file lawsuits because they got to go hash out in court as to what the words of a regulation actually say or don't say. This is not where anybody wants to go. And I, as an attorney, I advise my clients, you don't want to go down that road. That's the best way is to try to work this out. Fortunately, we have agencies that do want to work stuff out and are open to listening and working through this initial stages of the process. But it is something to consider, as agencies certainly they don't have the authority to have unfettered discretion to create their own rules out of thin air. I mean, they have to follow what the law says, and sometimes they get it wrong. A lot of times they don't. They're good people, and just it's a new program, so we're all working on this together. And, because of that, I think it's really important to remember that like we're not talking about a lot of bad actors here. Like bad actors, that's like 5% or less probably of all the licensees, right? Maybe fewer than that. I think that's generally speaking what you get in a lot of licensed industries is 5% or less of the folks that are out there trying to skirt the system. The rest of people are trying to follow the rules. It's hard, it's super complicated. I mean, look at what Dudley put up on the screen earlier, all the pages you have to review, not to mention the metric guide and the metric supplemental guide that is constantly changing, as well as revisions to regulations. There's just a lot to follow. Not saying that's a pass. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse ever, but it is a lot to follow. And so, we continue to ask for leeway, not leeway to get around the rules, to bend the rules for the industry, but more like leeway that goes both ways from my clients and the industry to the agencies, right? It's leeway both ways. They're learning this too and making revisions, and so are the industry. The industry is trying to work on this as well. It works both ways. Recently, I've had a number of phone calls, panic calls, or text messages from my clients. They've gotten a citation, they got a warning letter from the Department of Revenue, or maybe a corrective action plan request from the Department of Health. And they say, what do I do? And say, first off, hopefully you were nice to whoever was in your establishment, right? Let's keep your cool and we will figure it out later. It's never a time to blow up on an agent when they're standing in front of you, and you may be frustrated, but that's not the time to hash it out. But I've had a few things recently that came to mind. Is it's not just me. I've heard the folks earlier talking about these things that I don't want to belabor, but violations at the tune of $5,000 a pop for essentially data entry issues in metric that are obviously needing to be worked out. I'm dealing with one right now. It's a violation for the advertising rules that we know were not applied to every dispensary the same way. Some folks were hit with this and others were not for a similar event. And that's just not consistent. The consistency is an issue. Another for the CBD products that were going to be sold. Some folks are confused how could you sell CBD products in a dispensary? Could you not? If you did, you'd have to put them in a certain other part of the store. How is that to work? We've not gotten any, I don't believe, got any guidance on how that ever shook out. And I've got lots of dispensary clients who are still confused about that. Maybe you guys know the answer to that question, but none of my clients seem to know and can't find the answer. Other than it's not regulated. That's the answer we keep hearing. And so the request is that the agencies continue to try to work on a few different things that we know they're working on. I'm probably saying stuff that everyone's already thought about and you're already tired of hearing me talk. But, the three biggest thing for me is that, agencies continue to revise and tighten up the regulations. Dr. Eddie mentioned this a minute ago. You're always doing that, right? Every agency is always doing that. Board of Medical Licensure is a great example, been around a long time, has, they're definitely at cruising altitude, have a lot of regs, and they did a major overhaul to their opioid prescribing regulations about 7 years ago. It was a big deal. Everyone had an opinion and got involved, and it was humongous. And that went on for 6 months plus, I think. And that was just for one section of their regulations. Well, these are two different agencies with two different sets of regs. And so this is going to be an ongoing thing for a couple of years. I mean, we're not near cruising altitude at all on this program. It's going to be a while. I think if everybody keeps that in mind, that'll be super helpful. Secondly, it's about communicating. Communication is such a huge part of this, on communicating from the agencies to back to the licensees and vice versa, using this as an opportunity to hear real testimony from folks in the industry, not just people complaining online or talking when they get together at an event, but to be able to share real-time information back with the agencies about, hey, we know this is what you're saying, but that's not how this works, right? Let me show you what we're seeing and maybe we can figure it out together. And I'm very appreciative of the agencies that are doing that. It's super helpful. And then, lastly, it's reserving these big fines and, it seems like a giant hammer for the bad actors that are really, folks that are really doing wrong, right? And it's not a lot of people. I think both agencies have the ability to levy fines up to $5,000. It's not a $5,000 across the board. I would recommend considering having some leeway there. You don't always have to issue out a $5,000 fine for every violation. I mean, I'm looking at I got a client that's got 16 violations of the same code section. That's a lot of money. And it was unintentional, and I'm hoping we can figure it out. There's certainly folks that are out there that are maybe truly breaking the law, and that needs to be, those folks need to have the hand dealt to them, and so everyone knows not to do exactly what they did. I continue to hope that licensees will funnel their concerns, complaints, ideas, whatever it is, to this group, maybe through the trade associations especially, so that real edits can be made to the program, to the regulations in particular. The world I live in is about words, right? We look at actual words. We look at the words that are written in the regulations. And somebody says, you violated that. And I look at it and say, that's not what it says. So, well, this is how we interpret that. So, well, then you need to change what it says. So it says exactly what you mean. And that does matter, Now that's complicated because you can read a lot of words a lot of different ways, but when you're looking at staring down a fine of significance or even worse, it really does matter to my clients that we have regulations that reflect the intent of the legislature and also of what the agencies want to implement. I feel confident, though, that if this group continues to meet and listen to each other, that they can continue to revise and make this program better. We've said it from the very beginning. Back in 2018, we first put this together. This was going to be the best medical cannabis program in the country. It was going to be a real medical cannabis program. I still feel confident in that. It looks great so far. We're off to a good start. We've got a lot more work to do, but we're certainly on our way. And if this body gets really hamstrung and we can't do anything with regulations, then we've got the legislature to help us out. We've got great friends there to help us along the way there too. That was a long diatribe, and I apologize for rambling, but happy to answer any questions or any other comments you guys have.
Questions?
Thanks.
Thank you, Connor.
And Connor, I appreciate those comments and agree fully. And in the regulatory space, especially when when you're forced to do things quickly, there's plenty of opportunity to circle back around and relook at things. But with the program maturing like it is, I don't know about revenue, but we're still constantly having to keep up with the changes and writing new regs. So that doesn't give us time to circle back around unless there's something that's being brought to us that's not working. And so we definitely welcome those opportunities.
And I'll just comment too, Connor, I've got a lot of calls too. I don't represent people in appeals, and it's mostly from dispensaries and very lately actually, but for an incident that may have occurred in March or April, good faith, error, coded something incorrectly, no product diverted, those types of things. And there's been a number of $5,000 fines that have gone out. So I agree with your assessment that, maybe that's a time we could all talk about some kind of education or learning, or this is your warning letter, come in, let's go through this, make sure we get this right. Or what the two dispensary owners were telling us earlier, their COVID didn't match up. We're talking about whatever it was, 2/10 or whatever the actual difference, and you get two $5,000 fines. And that's hard to handle with a business, any business, a small business anywhere. And then as that continues to go on, to Angie's comments, all that gets kind of baked in the price of the product. You got your license fees, your taxes, your fines to stay in business. All that's got to be passed on to the customer. So, that's my 2 cents on it. It's maybe we can work. And I've just heard more about the dispensary end of it because that's people contact me about that. I don't know about the cultivators, but to hopefully work on that and have a better communication process, and maybe a smaller fine to start with. Hey, you do it 2 or 3 times, we'll bump you up to 5,000 or something, but just something to think about. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Oh, did I cut you off? Did I cut you off?
So a quick question. So in criminal law and things like that, intent is a huge part of it. Murder versus manslaughter, things like that, different charges. Are the regulatory agencies allowed to look at intent, or is it, if it's a fine, regardless whether it's intentional or accidental, y'all have got to lay the hammer down regardless? Like, do y'all have that ability and authority, or Or is it kind of straight laced and we need to give y'all a little bit more room to have that leeway?
I mean, we do have, the legislature does give us discretion up to a point. And I can promise you, I can document a large amount of discretion that's been granted over these last 18 months with a lot of education, a lot of technical assistance and trying to go certain ways. But for us, there are points and we've made those points clear. It's not like we're making people figure it out. I mean, this is, if you do this, this is what you can expect. So don't do this. And we'll help you not to do that. And if metric is messing up, we'll work with you. But I would, everybody that we license, I would beg you to go to the cannabis website, go to the FAQ page, and you'll see what we're making public. We intentionally don't release our consent orders to the public. We don't put them on the website. We can if people want us to, but they're public documents. Anybody can request them. But we are trying not to, punish people in the public square. We're trying to change behavior for things that we're concerned are endangering the public. And if I can change that behavior in less aggressive ways, I want to. But that our expectations are listed on the website.
I'd like to add, the department can't comment on any active investigations or any violations that may have take this on. Can you hear me better now? Is that better? Okay. But the department can't comment on any active investigations or any violations that may have been brought up today. What I can say, just to piggyback off of Dr. Aden, we are committed to definitely educating people, letting them know we understand that this is new for our state. And we're not in the business of trying to put the hammer down to take someone out of business. We definitely understand that it is a medical program and it is a controlled substance. So we're definitely thinking about the patients at hand. And when they walk into a dispensary, dispensing that product to that patient, whether it's an oversale or whether somebody's going back out the door, we want to make sure that we are regulating that in the best way possible. So yes, we understand that there's some additional education that has to take place. I understand you may be a little critical of our ABC agents that are, tasked with this responsibility. They have a big task in front of them. It's a learning lesson for all of us, so I agree with that. But I urge you to just work with us and, there are methods for appeal for any and all of those situations, but definitely reach out and continue to communicate with us. And we're going to get through it together. So.
And Connor, I know you know this, but I want everybody to know corrective action plans are not a bad thing. That doesn't mean you're in trouble. It just, here's where we're seeing deficiencies. We're giving you a chance to correct the deficiencies. You correct the deficiencies, we're good. We don't hold it against you. You're not, it's not like strike one. It's just, corrective action plans are a healthy way to make things better. And we use those aggressively for less serious infractions.
Dr. Eddie, thank you for saying that. That's a great point. A lot of my interactions so far with agencies, at least on the compliance side, have been with the Department of Health, and it's been incredibly positive because it has been through the corrective action plan process, which has been super helpful. Oftentimes, what we realize is that there's a misunderstanding, differences of opinion about how to do something, and that the agency is willing to work with my clients or other people that aren't my clients to not only help them correct it as it states, but also understand how to stay compliant going forward. And that's been incredibly helpful. I've not had that opportunity with the Department of Revenue. I don't know if you do the corrective action plans. I've got a number of clients that have citations that are sitting on my desk, so I'm sure we'll be interacting at some point soon. But yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. It's super helpful. And especially in this initial phases of the program, it's like nobody was trying to break the rules. So it's kind of like your warning, let's get it clear and then go forward. So yeah. Yeah. Well, I understand, but thank you. I appreciate your comments.
All right, we've we're about out of time. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to address to the board? And I would ask you, to come on up to the microphone first and then somebody in the back, but do try to be relatively brief. And if we've got more than a couple, we'll get those done and we'll. All right, thank you.
Thank you. My name's Brad Chisholm. I'm with River Remedy in Byram. We're a vertically integrated, Mississippi-owned, Mississippi-managed, non-multi-state operator company. We've been here a long time. I won't belabor you with a lot of the details. We've put this proprietary document together, but we wanted you to see it, wanted everyone in the room to have access to it. The next to the last page is really the punchline here. We fully expect between 33 and 35,000 patients by the end of the year based on recent growth. We're about 21,000 now. It continues to grow, but there's still impediments, and the viral nature that we've seen in other states of patient growth is not happening here, and we think some of that has to do with authorizing healthcare professionals. There's a glitch there, and we don't have an answer, but it's pretty obvious that we're not going to get to 40, we're not going to get to 50 until we streamline that intake process more. Okay. When you look at patient growth, patient spending habits, the new dispensaries, the Q2 average, and again, this is an average, about $2,300 a month, a day of sales across the state. Some are much higher, some are much lower. That's not going to improve in Q3 because there's just not enough patients given the increase in the number of dispensaries. The reality is that given the patient growth in Mississippi, the state's licensed over 800,000 square feet of canopy space. If you had your money, you pass the regs, you get a license. Well, the reality is we've got enough demand right now for about 35 to 40,000 feet of canopy. Now, I'm not suggesting that 800,000 feet of canopy has been built out. You've got two with 150,000 square feet allotments, and they built out much less than that. But the reality is, even if every patient in the state bought as much flower as he or she could, every day he or she could, by the end of the year, we're using about 15% of the demand of the capacity of the state. So what we're going to see in an industry that's growing, the regulatory process has been phenomenal from our perspective. Couldn't ask for, it's impossible to have done what you've done. Look, we get written up like everybody else, and you know the rules are the rules. We want people to comply with the rules. But the bottom line is that there's a supply glut. We've got people selling thousands of pounds of cannabis to dispensaries that's 6 months, 8 months old. And that's a consumer choice. If it passes a COA, that's a consumer choice. But what you've got is a glut in supply, and that glut's going to continue. And we'll see by Q4, you know, the average daily spend up $2,800, $2,900 if these trends continue. But there are going to be some very difficult times over the next year in this industry. And some of the people in this room won't be here next year. I don't have an answer for that completely, but you know, the law is set up so that there's unlimited licenses, but there are impediments when you're in a strictly highly regulated healthcare product like this, where the supply and demand rules don't fit, they don't work. So, I mean, we're happy to be here. We're excited. We're glad to have the colleagues in the room and the the advisory committee doing what you do and the state doing what it does. But we are whistling past the graveyard if we don't think there's a contraction coming in this industry. And there's a lot of stuff that can be done about that. There's a lot of good things that have been talked about today. In the end, they're going to be winners and losers in this market because that's the way capitalism works. But if 185 dispensaries licensed in this state, in Arkansas, there are 40. They have 90-something thousand patients. It's a mature market. That's probably where we'll end up in the end. The economics just don't work. So I'm not sure if it's a legislative solution or a regulatory solution or just the realities of the marketplace. But what we wanted to share with everyone here is that there is a tremendous supply glut. And from a public safety perspective, there will be temptations toward diversion. We've already seen it. And there will be more of those. So whoever said give the health department more money to enforce, I'm all for it. And the Department of Revenue as well, because there will be temptations when people have their life savings at risk and they're forced to make a bank note or pay a light bill or pay the some other regular expenditure, and it's just a natural challenge. So I didn't mean to rain on anybody's parade, but we've been in this thing from day one. We were the first people to ask for a license, the first people to ship product. We're doing okay. Nobody's doing great, but there are challenges to this industry that we all ought to acknowledge. And the advisory committee, if you could think about this stuff and help us figure out how collectively we can go back to the legislature and the regulatory bodies and address some of this stuff, realizing that some of it we can't. They're going to be winners and losers. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chisholm, can I make a comment on that? Thank you for the charts. But just, initially we heard that patients are paying 50 to 70% more in Mississippi than they are in other states. Yet we have a surplus, a glut. Won't that supply and demand try to balance from a capitalism point of view? Shouldn't that balance each other out? Yes, there are going to be a lot of losers.
This isn't a capitalist environment because you can't advertise. This isn't a capitalist environment. It's a highly regulated environment. Yes, the product will be lower, but if you have predatory pricing where 3 people end up owning the market because there are no independents, then you'll see the prices rise. I mean, look at the pharmaceutical industry. There's 5 pharmaceutical industries that run, that dominate, and prices are artificially high. When you have an oligopoly, that doesn't guarantee lower prices. We need competition. So yeah, there will be, if you walk in today to every dispensary in the state, they're getting cheaper product from the processors and the cultivators. But that's not fresh product. That's a glut that's come because people got ahead of themselves back 3 or 4 months ago and produced a lot more than they could sell. And they were counting on the patient curve going up faster. And so there are lots of reasons and lots of business mistakes people have made. I'm not trying to ask any government bailout for. I'm just trying to convey to you that this is a reality in the marketplace.
Thank you.
There were 40 during the rec program. No, they were very different. They limited the number of dispensaries. Yeah, that's correct. But the math still works. Any fool can make a living if there were 40 dispensaries in Mississippi with 100,000 patients, right? It's going to be tough to make a living with 185 dispensaries and 90,000 patients. It's just the realities of it all. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Ford. I'm a principal with Angel Leaf Medical Cannabis Dispensary out in Natchez, Louisiana. I'm a native of Lafayette, Louisiana, and I would like to say to this state that y'all did do it right. I come from a state where there's only 2 cultivators and 10 dispensary license holders. I was invited here to participate by my partner who's from Natchez, Mississippi, and I was very concerned. But after looking at your program and after speaking to Senator Blackwell in a private meeting about how this program was going to be set up in the state of Louisiana, I began to look at how I could invest in the cannabis space in the state of Mississippi and invited some other Louisianans to invest their dollars with our company here in Mississippi. I am grateful that y'all are here. I am grateful that we have rules and regulations in place where the illicit market will not take over this industry. I do believe that there's some issues that we have here, but it's not issues that we cannot work out. Rome was not built in a day. When I made my investment into this state, I said I need a year, maybe a year and a half. So I understood coming in that we're going to be growing pains, and all of us businessmen that have opened businesses before know that we have growing pains when you first open up a business. One of the suggestions that I'd like to make is reciprocity. Mississippi patients can cross over to Louisiana and there is no limits on what they can buy. They have dual recommendations for Louisiana, recommendations for the state of Mississippi. While we are allowing Mississippians to cross over to Mississippi to buy their medicine in Louisiana, and we are not allowing Louisianans to cross over where they can get their medicine cheaper than what they can get it in Louisiana. So I'm recommending and asking that this committee take to the legislature reciprocity. Another thing that I'm recommending is that we need to be able to market our businesses in this state. Some kind of way we have to get the word out to the patients that we exist, and we have to get the information to them about the medicine and its benefits. I think that you guys are on a good track. We just have to come together, continue to work this industry, and we're going to be successful. Yes, there's some problems, but I believe in what you all are doing, and I think that we have a great opportunity here in the state of Mississippi. When we look at patients and the patient's ability, no, let me back up. Our physicians that have spent years educating themselves in the field of medicine, when we tie their hands and tell them that they cannot prescribe or recommend to their patients a plant-based medicine that we know is good for them, it's not right. We need to take the handcuffs off of the physicians and let the physicians do what they do. Please. I own an aging village in Lafayette, Louisiana, where we connect healthcare services to housing. I had several of my residents that were depressed, rheumatoid arthritis, bunch of surgeries. They were able to get their recommendations, and I saw the quality of their lives change right in the front of me. I didn't have to release them to the nursing homes. I didn't have to release them from out of their communities, out of their church communities. Hey, this medicine works. Let's free it for the citizens of the state of Mississippi. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. All right, any board members have anything else? Okay, nothing further. Thank you all for coming. We'll stand adjourned.